Nestled in the eastern expanse of Quebec's province, gracing the southern banks of the majestic St. Lawrence, lies the Bas-Saint Laurent region. A canvas painted with quaint coastal hamlets, enchanting isles, and cities steeped in maritime lore. Upon setting foot in this expanse, one could readily discern that the traveler has ventured into the sublime vacation haven of Canada. Here, the renowned Route 132 elegantly winds, tracing the river's curves before unveiling the splendor of the Gaspésie Peninsula. Amidst this panorama, Bas-Saint Laurent emerges not merely as a threshold to the famed Gaspésie, but as a destination in its own right, beckoning travelers with its allure and charm. At its nucleus thrives Rimouski, the region's largest urban hub, a bustling tapestry interwoven with coastal charm and maritime echoes. Rimouski, a vibrant city with over 49,000 residents, harmoniously blends history, maritime tradition, and modern economy. So, it is no wonder that this regional metropolis houses a famous maritime historic site. Delving into the past, the Pointe-au-Père Maritime Historic Site unveils not only the history of the region, but also offering a broader perspective on Canadian and North American maritime heritage. And so that the fame of the place is whole, there it is, the Onondaga submarine. This amazing ship that served in the maritime forces before it was decommissioned in the year 2000 and eventually towed from Halifax to Rimouski.
Ayant servi de 1967 à 2000,
Having served from 1967 to 2000, the submarine Onondaga had a 33-year career, which is already long for a surface vessel and very long for a submarine, due to the enormous pressures it undergoes. This means the structure experiences significant stress. Additionally, technology has changed dramatically over the past 30 to 40 years. So by 2000, these vessels had reached the normal end of their careers. It was retired from active service, and we, at the Pointe-au-Père Maritime Historic Site, requested this submarine to transform it into a museum.
afin de le transformer en musée.
For visitors, stepping aboard a submarine that feels almost alive opens a gateway to a world shrouded in mystery and secrecy. This venture into a hidden, enigmatic realm reveals the fascinating world of submariners.
Donc, ce qu'on veut vous faire comprendre, c'est l'aventure humaine, beaucoup plus que l'aventure guerrière.
So what we want you to understand is the human adventure, much more than the war adventure. It's the human adventure of the people who lived in a place like this. Because we understand very well that it's extremely confined. 70 men lived on board, so they were constantly in close quarters, with no privacy. One could not be claustrophobic or need much privacy.
Vivre dans un sous-marin, c'est comme vivre au cœur d'une machine.
Living in a submarine is like living at the heart of a machine. There are 6,000 valves on board, controls, and so on. But in the control room, at the heart of the submarine, there are obviously many screens and indicators. Everything necessary for the operation of the vessel.
Et ici, on a les consoles de tir des torpilles.
Here we have the torpedo firing consoles, since it was a war submarine. So, it was an armed vessel. The torpedoes were fired from the front, but they were controlled from the control room.
De l'autre côté, l'écran de navigation.
On the other side, the navigation screen allowed the crew not only to follow the route of their own vessel but also to track the route of the target, whether to attack it or to follow it. This was the control screen, constantly updated with information from the sonars in front of me and the periscopes.
Devant moi et des périscopes. Alors, ici, on a le périscope d'attaque. Donc,
here we have the attack periscope. So this is where we could see outside to follow the ship, the target. It was the commander who, in attack mode, operated the periscope.
le commandant, les officiers sonars.
The commander, officers, sonar operators, and so on, worked as a team to track the ship, follow the target, and eventually attack it. Fortunately, this never happened in the Onondaga's career.
Ce qui heureusement n'est jamais arrivé dans la carrière de l'Onondaga.
Onondaga, equipped with a diesel-electric propulsion system, combines diesel engines and electric motors for both surface and submerged travel. At periscope depth, the submarine employs a snorkel mast, running diesel engines while remaining mostly submerged. This hybrid mode balances the need for stealth with the imperative to recharge batteries, a delicate dance between concealment and endurance. Beneath the waves, silence prevails. Electric motors take over, drawing energy from the batteries. This submerged travel allows the submarine to move undetected.
Nous sommes ici dans la salle des moteurs diesel, c'est-à-dire que sa propulsion est assurée par deux moteurs électriques.
We are here in the diesel engine room. Its propulsion is ensured by two electric motors powered by enormous batteries. There were 220 tons of batteries on board. To recharge these batteries, there were two huge generators, the two diesels we have here. The noise was enormous, and the heat unbearable. So, it was a very challenging position to be a mechanic on a submarine. Moreover, in the submarine, everything smelled of diesel. The air was recycled, so we lived in a confined space with reused air, and very quickly, the clothes, the air, the skin, everything smelled of diesel, the smell of cooking, the smell of men. It was very, very easy to recognize a submariner coming ashore. He wasn't like other sailors. His smell gave him away.
Ce n'était pas un marin comme les autres, son odeur le trahissait. Pour avoir leur dauphin, donc être reconnu comme sous-marinier.
To earn their dolphins, to be recognized as submariners, they had to know by heart the 6,000 valves on board. Each had their own job, sailors, mechanics, electricians, cooks, etc., but they also had a secondary job. Tasks were numerous on board, the crew was small, and everyone had to do a bit of everything. Those who really know the submarine best are the masters and sailors who have long careers. 12, 13, 15, 20 years as submariners, while the officers generally spend much less time on board, move up in rank, and go to a bigger ship.
Alors que les officiers, en général, sont beaucoup moins longtemps à bord, vont monter en grade, aller dans un bateau plus gros.
Through extensive restoration, the Onondaga has been preserved in all its historical authenticity. Visitors can traverse its narrow corridors, explore the control rooms, and wander through the living quarters, fully immersing themselves in the life of a submariner. On board, 70 crew members faced a true test of endurance, sharing confined spaces that forged a profound sense of camaraderie and discipline.
La cabine du commandant.
The captain's cabin is the only individual cabin on the submarine.
On voit cependant que ce n'est vraiment pas immense.
However, it is not very spacious. He doesn't have more space than the others, just a private area to rest a bit better and especially to work in peace.
Le carré des officiers, donc 7 ou 8 officiers.
The officers' mess, 7 or 8 officers lived here. The bunks are tiny, stacked on top of each other. The living space is extremely limited, even for the officers. Living on a submarine was far from comfortable.
La minuscule cuisine du sous-marin, où les cuisiniers devaient.
The tiny submarine kitchen where the cooks had to prepare food for 70 men every day. So, 3 meals a day, plus snacks, and at night, baking bread, cakes, and so on. Everything was done in this tiny kitchen for 70 men.
Minuscule cuisine, et ce pour 70 hommes. Alors nous sommes ici dans le carré des maîtres. Les maîtres.
Here we are in the chief's mess. In the ship's hierarchy, the chiefs are between the sailors and the officers. This is perhaps the largest mess area. It was where people gathered to play cards, talk, etc. Up to 20 people could sit around the table. The table could be extended, and this was perhaps the liveliest area on the submarine, with the most atmosphere.
Et c'est peut-être l'endroit du sous-marin où il y avait le plus d'action, le plus d'atmosphère. Comme vous le voyez, pour certains matelots.
As you can see, for some sailors, the bunks were very minimal. The space to sleep was extremely limited, especially for those with the upper bunk. Additionally, there were valve controls that other sailors might come to operate in the middle of the night as needed for the ship's operation.
Ouvrir ou fermer selon les besoins de la marche du bateau. Et finalement, le carré des matelots. Un endroit où
Finally, the sailors' mess, a place where 19 men could sleep together. Obviously, several men worked while others slept or rested. They played cards and smoked, as smoking was allowed on board. Living together in such conditions was extremely difficult and required a special character. Submariners have the admiration of other sailors because working on a submarine is extremely challenging.
Parce que travailler dans un sous-marin, c'est extrêmement difficile. Alors on voit très bien qu'il y a des restrictions de hauteur.
There are significant height restrictions. A man taller than 1.8 meters would often bump his head on the ceiling, valves, handles, and so on. You had to be constantly careful of your head.
Il faut faire attention à sa tête constamment.
The Onondaga played a pivotal role during the Cold War, though its transition from active duty to museum was marked by significant challenges, including a near miss with being sold for scrap metal. Its missions in anti-submarine warfare and maritime surveillance underscored its strategic importance.
Alors ici la salle des torpilles, la preuve que ce bateau était un navire de guerre.
Here is the torpedo room, the proof that this vessel was a warship. This is the armed part of the submarine. These torpedo tubes could launch those famous guided bombs to attack other ships. A torpedo? We have one here.
Une torpille, on en a une ici. Pour lancer la torpille, on chargeait le tube évidemment.
To launch the torpedo, the tube is loaded, the torpedo is inserted into the tube, and the firing, as well as the direction, is controlled from the control room.
Qu'on faisait le tir et qu'on dirigeait la torpille. Le sous-marin Onondaga, c'est un bateau de la guerre froide.
The Onondaga submarine is a Cold War vessel. However, we know that it served, among other things, in anti-drug operations, monitoring a ship suspected of transporting drugs, taking photos with the periscope and eventually gathering evidence that allowed the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to press charges. This is one of the missions these vessels could be assigned, in addition to their role as warships. So, we have access to something, detonating, mysterious, secret.
Donc on a accès là à quelque chose d'étonnant, de mystérieux, de secret.
St. Lawrence River, a vital artery of commerce and culture, stretching from the Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean, has long been known for its challenging navigation, necessitating the establishment of maritime pilotage stations to ensure safe passage. In the days of the first European settlers, the French, who were the initial occupants of this region, intentionally left the river unmarked by lighthouses. This deliberate omission was a strategic move to thwart their enemies, the English, from navigating the treacherous waters and gaining access to the interior. With the conquest of the region by the English, the approach to navigation changed. The frequent shipwrecks, a consequence of the river's hazards and the lack of guidance, prompted the construction of lighthouses. These beacons of safety, coupled with the expertise of specialized pilots, greatly reduced the dangers of river navigation. Located here at Pointe-au-Père was one of Canada's leading navigational aid centers, featuring a pilot station and its first lighthouse. At 33 meters, it is Eastern Canada's second highest lighthouse, offering spectacular views from the light chamber, which are well worth the 128-step climb to the top. The pilot station at Pointe-au-Père played a crucial role in the rescue of survivors from the most devastating maritime tragedy in Canadian history, the wreck of the ocean liner Empress of Ireland.
Ce navire qui a coulé au large ici le 29 mai 1914 durant une nuit de brouillard et qui a fait...
This ship sank off the coast here on May 29, 1914, during a foggy night, resulting in 1,012 casualties. It was a tragedy almost on the scale of the Titanic, but forgotten in history. We thoroughly discussed this forgotten tragedy here, with an exhibition room featuring many artifacts and objects brought back by divers from the ship. We have survivor testimonies, and so on. We provide as detailed an account as possible of the ship and the tragedy that befell it.
On a aussi une salle de projection avec un
We
document
also have a projection room with a multimedia video that not only recreates the sinking, but also places the Empress of Ireland in its historical context. What was happening at the beginning of the century? Why were so many large ocean liners crossing the Atlantic? What was the significance of this great era of European emigration to America? This is the kind of context and information we aim to convey to our visitors.
à nos visiteurs.
During the early 20th century, Europe saw a significant wave of migration to North America. Millions of Europeans, facing economic hardship, unemployment, poverty, political instability, and persecution, sought better opportunities across the Atlantic. The industrial boom in the United States and Canada promised better job and a more prosperous life. Steamships, which made the journey faster and more reliable than sailing ships, were the main means of travel. The Museum Pointe-au-Père houses the original model of the Empress of Ireland, crafted in 1905 by the same workers who built the ship.
Un navire très rapide.
A very fast ship. It made the Liverpool to Quebec crossing in 6 days. So, a luxurious, fast, and safe vessel. At the time, it was said that it would change the lives of immigrants because, finally, there were beautiful, large ships to bring them to Canada. This ship belonged to the Canadian Pacific. The Canadian Pacific, which already had a railway from one ocean to the other, established a shipping company at the beginning of the 20th century to directly pick up its passengers in Europe.
Directement en Europe.
With a length of 570 feet and a capacity of 1,580 passengers, the Empress of Ireland was designed for speed, comfort, and safety.
Qu'est-ce qui a causé le naufrage de l'Empress of Ireland?
What caused the sinking of the Empress of Ireland? It was a collision with another ship in thick fog on the night of May 29, 1914. What made the tragedy worse was that the Empress sank extremely quickly, in just 14 minutes.
Et pour symboliser les 14 minutes du naufrage, eh bien nous avons
To symbolize the 14 minutes of the sinking, we have recorded the testimonies of 14 survivors.
tout simplement écouté les différents
Visitors can simply listen to these different testimonies in English or French, pressing the appropriate button. This way, they can hear the perspective of a survivor of the ship, although the accounts are recited by actors.
évidemment récités par des comédiens.
In the depths of the St. Lawrence River, the Empress of Ireland met her tragic fate. A fateful collision with the Norwegian collier SS Storstad sent the grand vessel to a watery grave. The river's depths claimed 1,012 souls, etching this calamity into the annals of history as one of Canada's most sorrowful maritime disasters.
Alors on a ici la simulation de la façon dont le Storstad
Here we have a simulation of how the Storstad, a Norwegian coal freighter, rammed the Empress of Ireland and ultimately sent it to the bottom. The Storstad and the Empress met near Pointe-au-Père on a foggy night. Visibility was zero. We can't fully depict that on screen, but you can see the fog.
mais on voit qu'il y a du brouillard. Et l'Empress se dirige vers l'est.
The Empress was heading east, and the Storstad approached on its starboard side, the right side of the ship, eventually striking and penetrating the hull between the two funnels, right in the center of the ship. This was the worst possible location for the collision, because it involved the ship's two largest compartments, the two engine rooms. Almost a third of the ship was flooded.
C'est presque le tiers du navire qui va être envahi par l'eau. L'Empress se couche.
The Empress listed to its side and sank in 14 minutes. The final toll of the tragedy was 1,012 victims and 465 survivors, due to the speed at which the Empress disappeared into the waters of the St. Lawrence River.
Sous les flots du Saint-Laurent. Parmi les survivants, un homme au destin assez exceptionnel, William
Among the survivors was a man with a quite exceptional fate, William Clark, who was a stoker, a coal shoveler. He survived the Titanic disaster and then found a job on the Empress of Ireland, surviving that sinking as well. This man, who worked in the engine room and would normally have had less chance than others of escaping, survived both of these great tragedies.
Va survivre à ces deux grandes tragédies.
The Empress of Ireland site is located at a depth of approximately 130 feet. The wreck was primarily explored using traditional diving methods. Early exploration was challenging due to the cold and murky waters of the St. Lawrence River, where divers faced poor visibility and strong currents.
Dès la fin mai 1914, on va envoyer des scaphandriers explorer l'épave, voir si on peut la renflouer. C'est impossible.
At the end of May 1914, divers were sent to explore the wreck and see if it could be salvaged. It was impossible. Instead, they retrieved valuables, mail bags, the safe, and so on. Then, the Empress of Ireland was forgotten for 50 years. It wasn't until 1964 that recreational divers rediscovered the wreck. Over the course of many dives, they brought up a lot of objects, some of which are used to educate visitors about the ship here at the museum. Divers have offered us certain items, such as these beautiful portholes from first and second class.
Première classe et deuxième classe. Comme l'Empress of Ireland a navigué pendant 8 ans,
Since the Empress of Ireland sailed for 8 years, we are fortunate to have many photographic records. It is a well-documented ship that we can easily illustrate. Among the valuable pieces brought back are the engine order telegraph, the helm wheel, and the compass binnacle. These items can be seen in situ, either on the ship's bridge or in the wheelhouse. This helps people easily understand the utility of these items and where they were located on the ship.
l'utilité de ces choses-là, où elles étaient utilisées, où elles étaient situées sur le navire.
The Empress of Ireland's site has been subject to strict preservation laws in Canada, protecting the wreck from extensive salvage operations. These preservation efforts, along with public interest, reflect the historical and cultural impact of the tragedy.
Ici, un moment dans la vie des passagers, avec des objets.
Here, we present a moment in the lives of the passengers, featuring objects retrieved from the first and second class sections. These items are always placed in context with the help of photographs, light fixtures, a table from the first class music room, items from the dining room, or the cabins.
Alors ici, quelques éléments de la cuisine et de la salle à manger qui nous montrent à quel point.
We also have some elements from the kitchen and dining room that show how luxurious and well-equipped this ship was. Being a steamship, steam was widely used, even in the kitchens, where there were huge steam tables, heated by hot water from the ship's boilers.
À voir l'état dans lequel certains objets sont.
Looking at the condition of some of these items, particularly souvenirs that were well packed inside luggage, you might think they came straight from a store, rather than having spent 70 or 80 years under the waters of the St. Lawrence River. For example, here is a little gadget used to play tricks on guests, which looks as if it came directly from store shelves.
Eh bien, on jurerait qu'il sort directement des tablettes du magasin.
Explore the intriguing depths of the Onondaga submarine. Climb the heights of the historic Pointe-au-Père Lighthouse. And immerse yourself in the poignant stories at the Empress of Ireland Museum. Together, these attractions offer a compelling fusion of historical significance, cultural richness, and natural beauty, ensuring the Pointe-au-Père Maritime Historic Site remains an essential visit for those wishing to immerse themselves in the maritime legacy of Canada.